cold wind moved slowly across the fields that morning, carrying dust, silence, and the kind of heaviness that settles over a place where too many decisions have already been made. Thomas Whitmore stood at the edge of the auction yard, his hands folded behind his back, watching people the way a man watches livestock, carefully, without emotion, or at least pretending not to feel any. He had built his life on control, land, workers, money, reputation. In his world, everything had a price, and everything could be owned. That was what he believed. That was what he had always believed, until the day he made a purchase that would follow him for the rest of his life. The auctioneer's voice echoed through the crowd, loud and practiced, rising and falling like a performance repeated too many times. Buyers laughed, coins exchanged hands, and people avoided looking too closely at the faces being sold. It was easier that way, easier not to see fear, easier not to see humanity. Thomas told himself he was only there for labor. His farm had grown, his workers were aging, and winter had been harsh. This was business, nothing more. That is what he repeated in his mind as she stepped forward. She didn't lower her eyes like the others. She stood still, shoulders straight, her expression calm but distant, as if her thoughts were somewhere far beyond the crowd. The sunlight caught the edge of her face, and for a brief moment the noise around Thomas faded. He noticed not beauty first, but stillness, a quiet strength that didn't beg for approval. It unsettled him. People like her were not supposed to look unbroken. The bidding started slowly. Thomas did not intend to raise his hand. He told himself that twice. But something about the way others looked at her, as if she were an object to be claimed, stirred something uncomfortable inside him. Pride, perhaps, or possession. Before he fully realized it, his hand lifted. The price climbed higher than expected. A few men laughed, assuming he was competing for vanity rather than work. Thomas did not lower his hand. When the hammer fell, the decision was final. He had bought her for a price. A simple transaction, clean, legal, ordinary for that time. Yet as she was led toward him, she did not look afraid. She looked at him once, directly, and in that brief moment, Thomas felt something he could not explain. Not victory, not satisfaction, something closer to unease. Her name was Eliza. The journey back to the farm was quiet. The wagon wheels creaked along the dirt road, while the sun dropped slowly toward the horizon. Thomas tried to focus on practical matters, schedules, work assignments, harvest planning, but his thoughts kept drifting back to that look. Eliza spoke little during the first days. She worked without complaint, moved efficiently, and avoided unnecessary conversation. The other workers noticed her calm, and some resented it. Others respected it. Thomas watched from a distance, telling himself he was only ensuring productivity. But small things began to change. One evening, as rain fell heavily against the barn roof, Thomas passed by and heard singing, soft, low, almost a whisper. Eliza's voice carried through the darkness, not sad, not hopeful, but steady, the sound of someone refusing to disappear. He stopped without realizing it. The song ended, and silence returned, yet something lingered. For the first time in years, Thomas felt ashamed without knowing exactly why. Days turned into weeks. Eliza never asked for kindness, never pleaded, never tried to gain favor. She simply existed with dignity in a place designed to strip it away. That quiet resistance began to disturb Thomas more than rebellion ever could. He found himself noticing things he had ignored his entire life. Exhaustion in the workers' faces, the way laughter disappeared when he approached, the fear hidden beneath obedience. One afternoon, a young worker collapsed in the field from heat and hunger. Thomas ordered him back to work out of habit, the words automatic. Eliza stepped forward, not aggressively, but firmly. She said only one sentence, calm and clear. A man cannot stand if he is already broken. No one spoke after that. Thomas felt anger rise first. Who was she to speak? But the anger faded quickly, replaced by something heavier, because he knew she was right. That night, sleep did not come easily. The house felt larger than usual, emptier. Thomas walked the halls, hearing echoes of decisions he had never questioned before. He told himself the world worked this way, that he had done nothing different from other men. Yet the justification felt weaker each time he repeated it. Winter arrived early that year. Supplies ran low, and sickness spread among the workers. Eliza spent nights caring for others, sharing food meant for herself, refusing rest. Thomas noticed. He began sending extra blankets, more food, small changes he pretended were practical decisions. But deep down, something inside him was shifting. The certainty that had guided his entire life was beginning to crack. One evening, during a storm that rattled the windows, Thomas finally spoke to her alone. He asked why she helped others when no one expected it. Eliza answered quietly, without accusation. Because suffering does not end when it is ignored. The words stayed with him long after she left the room. Guilt is a slow thing. It does not arrive all at once. It grows quietly, filling spaces you didn't know were empty. Thomas began remembering his father's lessons about ownership, power, and order. He had followed them without question. Now, for the first time, he wondered what kind of man those lessons had made him. The turning point came late one night when a fire broke out near the storage barn. Flames spread quickly, and panic followed. Workers rushed to save what they could. In the chaos, a beam collapsed, trapping Thomas beneath burning debris. Smoke filled his lungs, heat closing in. He struggled, certain this was how his story would end, alone, buried beneath the very life he had built. Then someone pulled him free. Through the smoke, coughing and exhausted, he saw Eliza. She had risked her life to save his, not out of obligation, not out of fear, simply because she chose to. As rain finally extinguished the flames, Thomas lay on the ground, staring at the sky, realizing something unbearable. The person he believed he owned had just given him mercy he had never earned. From that night forward, nothing felt the same. Thomas began changing things quietly at first. Lighter workloads, fairer treatment, longer rest. The town noticed and whispered. Some called him weak. Others said he had lost his mind. But the weight inside him no longer allowed him to return to who he had been. The more he listened, the more he understood the truth he had spent years avoiding. Ownership had cost him his humanity. Spring arrived, bringing new life to the fields. One morning, Thomas called Eliza to the porch. His hands trembled slightly as he spoke. Papers rested on the table between them, freedom documents. He could not meet her eyes at first. When he finally did, his voice was quieter than it had ever been. No one should belong to another person, he said. The words felt both late and necessary. Eliza accepted the papers without celebration, only a nod. Freedom, after all, was not a gift. It was something that should never have been taken. She left the farm soon after, walking down the same road she had arrived on months earlier. Thomas watched until she disappeared beyond the trees. The farm continued, but the silence remained. Wealth no longer felt like success. Control no longer felt like strength. Thomas understood now that the price he paid was not money. It was the realization of who he had been and the knowledge that some things cannot be undone. Years later, people would say Thomas Whitmore became a different man, kinder, quieter. Some even called him honorable. But he knew the truth. Change did not erase the past. It only taught you how heavy it truly was. He had bought her for a price, but in the end, he paid with his soul.